What job should marketing get done in a company?
When I think about the purpose of marketing, it is really to create clarity. That is the thing that I always go back to is whether that is creating clarity about value for your customers or your prospects, or I think the very undervalued part of marketing is creating clarity internally, right? Like I think about a lot of work. So, for context, what I do is I work with mainly completely startups, right? So, under 10 million B2B SaaS companies. And often what they're trying to figure out is what is our positioning? What is our messaging? How are we different? And that is also creating misalignment internally if that's not clear, right? And so there's a lot of value that marketing can provide. I've even found this at later stage companies when I worked in house to align around the value you provide your customer and why you are actually different. And that could just be the experience is different. Doesn't mean your product has to be, right? And I think there's a lot of purpose and jobs to be done around creating clarity internally as well as externally.
That's Shannon, a fractional CMO and advisor with a killer track record in marketing, brand, messaging, content, the list goes on. She's also just such a genuine human who is willing to share her experiences and wisdom throughout this entire conversation. Before we get back to that, run the intro. Welcome to On Marketing, a show where we uncover what marketing is. I won't tell you what to think, I'll help you improve how you think about marketing and life. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist by day and a podcast host by night. This is recorded on February 20th, 2025. All opinions shared in this podcast are the individual views of the host and guests, not those of their employers or associate organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional marketing or life guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. Thank you for being here. You recently had a post talking about the difference, how companies try to be different, and usually they're around features. I kind of like, though, that you're bringing in this part of like ensuring the internal team also understands that kind of differentiation or what is the difference. How do you, like, what would that look like? I mean, obviously sending an all, company email, like how do you build that and how do you get people to galvanize around maybe our difference? Or is it okay to have like three different differences and different people within the company? Or does that create lack of clarity as you're kind of talking about?
It really does start with the vision of the leader. So often the companies I work with are still founder led, right? And it is why did this founder decide one day to completely uproot the entirety of their life to start this company? And sometimes it is, a silly answer of like, they had capital available to them and wanted to build something cool, which is possible. I don't always work with those ones. But it is often like I saw this huge problem in the market that wasn't being solved, and I became obsessed with needing to solve it. And I needed to solve it in a different way. And if you look at now, like the difference between, when I started in tech in 2016 and now there's a thousand solutions for everything. Not even like five. Like there are so many, right? And the difference is, sure, you can compare feature to feature, and I hope that you're building a product that isn't an exact replica of somebody else's. But really, the way that you become different is the experience people have with your company. So, like, how are you defining what customer support looks like? How are you defining what marketing looks like? Like, how do you express yourself to the world, which has historically been called brand? And I think that's really undervalued. What the impact of that can be, right? Which is how people know you, right? And so, I think to get to your question, be to give you an actual answer about what that looks like, it is a very consistent message from the leadership of the company all the way down to the front lines that this is why we do what we do and this is why we do it here. Like you could go work at that competitor that has one feature that's different, but why do you do it here? And I think those are the ones that are the most successful. And it's not an all company email. Like it might be, like it should be there somewhere, but this is a conversation like folks would have around values back in the day, right? Like, how do you make sure they're integrated? It's like, well, they have to be the decision making framework of everything you do. And if they aren't, things fall apart pretty fast, right? It's not about a poster on a wall when we all worked in offices or an all company email, right? It's really about like, how do we build a company and how do we engage our customers and how is it different than how everyone else is doing it? Or at least how our direct competitors are doing it. How are our buyers experiencing us differently? And that has to come from the top and has to be the way you hire and has to be the way you, build your team and how you say yes and no to customers. Like who is a great customer and who isn't, right?
Yeah.
I think it is deeper than people let it make it sound.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to kind of put it as a person has virtues. They have things at which they are aiming their life towards, whether that's compassion, kindness, wisdom. But sometimes, at least for me, my actions can be out of line with those virtues. So I could put it on a wall to say, I'm a compassionate person, but when you're late on my Starbucks order, I don't become compassionate. Like, and that's, I think, company-wise too, is it's like we can put these on a wall. Now, the question though that I have is, so I agree with you that many times it's kind of this top-down, the founder has a vision or they saw the problem in the market. When a marketer is in a company and they don't, because it seems then like I agree with you, marketing's experience and the experience is everywhere. It's everything in a company. I don't see sometimes marketers are allowed to play in that big of a sandbox. They're kind of, how do you wrestle with that? And maybe it's very different because you're being brought in and they want that kind of.
Not
Because
always.
I think, no, okay. So how can marketers, and maybe this is more for me, how can we play up, or there's probably like a better term for that, because I do believe marketers, like in the word market, which is the defined set of people who we serve, all that, which usually is set by like founders or other people than the marketer. How do I wrestle with that of how can I still bring value in improving the experience when I don't touch it all, or how do I get to touch all of the experience?
To flip the context a little of the question, it is really how can I take as a marketer the vision of our company and build marketing from it? So it all should be aligned. And if there isn't a clear vision, you have to make that choice if you want to work for that company or not, right? Like, so
It's fair.
I think we've all been in jobs where we feel value misaligned. I think that's what you were talking about earlier is like, you're like, oh, the way decisions are made here is not aligned with the way that I would make decisions. So either I like suck it up and just do the job and whatever, like we can always talk about the purpose of careers in our lives, right? But I think there is like a lot of, hey, I want to go work, especially when you're early stage, right? I want to go work for this founder because I agree with the way this person makes decisions, this person is solving problems, and now I want to create a marketing strategy or marketing programs. Maybe you're just doing paid ads, but like you want to be able to create those ads in alignment with the way that the organization is being run. And that actually gets you closer to the leadership team consistently. Like that will always be seen. Like if you're able to say, let me give a tangible answer because this sounds a little esoteric, but if you're able to say like a few of the ways that our leader leads is like we ship really fast. Say like we are constantly shipping new features every week. A big priority of what we're doing is we're getting customer feedback on those. So as a marketer, you probably you shouldn't be shipping quarterly then, right? Like you should be thinking, how can we also ship really fast? How can we also get feedback really quickly? And how can we provide that feedback loop to the rest of the organization? Because that's clearly something that's valued by the leadership team. And that's the way, like, I can say I now look back on my career of like those like accelerator moments where you end up in the right environment and you're like value aligned and you get promoted a bunch and like I have a specific company that I was at for 3 years that like totally fundamentally changed my career, right? And it was because the way the CMO ran the marketing org, this is also a really big company, so it doesn't always go all the way up to the CEO, but was really, I could see exactly why he was making decisions, and I started making them the exact same way for the content and comms org I ran. So you were able to see extreme alignment, right? I was like, oh, so he really cares about learning fast and breaking stuff. All right, I'm going to learn fast and break it. And if he has feedback on the fact that it's broken, I'm going to say, well, I modeled it after the values you're showing the team, right? And I think that is what really makes marketing so much more than pushing buttons and managing tools is we can set the standard for the way that decisions are made because we are the most external facing like team in the organization, really, in terms of magnitude of how many people experience us.
I love that because it's definitely rooted in some level of ownership. I might not be able to change that vision, which then, to your point, maybe I shouldn't have joined the company. But if I'm on the ship, I need to kind of, even if I disagree to commit, and you're starting to kind of take things and starting to pivot and bring clarity to, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that is the best way because too many times we want people to listen to us, or because my thought is like, what if you see something within that vision or within the position or within the market that you'll want to bring up to say, hey, I'm not sure we saw that. How do you do that then as a marketer? Because believe that's kind of part of the marketer. I just think it's part of our responsibility too when we see something. So how do you do that? Do you have to earn that? Is that by kind of doing what you just said, and then eventually they'll get the respect to have that conversation, to be like, oh, I can see that point? Or
I think it's more of the way it's communicated, right? Which is like, hey, I've gathered all of these data points. Like I've gathered all of this information, right? Even if it's anecdotal, right? Like we've done, we launched these 5 pieces of content and because we aligned as a company around those being really important. And it seems like 3 of them are completely falling flat. Like let's evaluate, and they're all the same quality level. Like if we're talking about that, right? And you could say, hey, like, I just want to bring this to you as intel. Like, this is just intel. Like, that's all it is, right? It's not anything deeper than that. It's not because, sometimes it is people being like having strong egos about certain things. And if you just take the ego out of it and say, hey, I'm just reporting on the things that are working and aren't. And I would love to spend more time on the things that are. And if you want me to spend more time on the things that aren't, like, these are probably the 2 ways I could change them. I could try. But I think what I'm finding is that they're actually falling flat. And I think it's just as you were saying, my responsibility as a person that is in contact with the market, to tell you that, right? Like I've had that happen before a lot where I was at a startup and I remember we were talking about launching new positioning and the founders were really sure about certain words. And every time I talk to our customers, they never use them. And I'm like, I'm struggling with understanding how. Like, if you choose that, that's fine. But just know the plan's now going to have to be to move our market to us instead of us moving to them. That's an okay strat, whatever you want. Just telling you that's what's going to result. Like, the work is going to be reflected in that. And they still committed to wanting to use them. And I said, yeah, no problem. Just letting you know, this is now my workload. It's different than what it would have been. Right. So
I love
I
that.
think that's, and then of course you can make decisions on whether you want to do that work or not. But I think it's really just coming to a lot of it with like, this is just information. Like we're just adults that created problems for ourselves that we need to solve.
I love
Like
it. I
that's
love it. Kind of, I wouldn't say emotionless, but kind of trying to have that ego, that emotion in check, to just say, this is it. There's no kind of emotion behind it. I like that. Very tactful is kind of the way in which, as you're talking there, it's like, it's a very tactful way to approach it, where you could have the same intention, but if you come up with like, this isn't resonating, we need to change things, it's a very different way
Totally.
to receive it than, hey, I have this information intel. I love that. In your career, Shannon, which you kind of talked about, you've been in kind of marketing for a bit. What is something maybe recently or over the last 3, 4, 5 years that you're thinking differently about in marketing? So maybe you believed X. So behind me, I have some Gary Vaynerchuk books. Maybe I believed you need to put out 100 pieces of content, but now I believe something slightly different. Does anything come to your mind of a big shift in how you think about marketing that's different today?
Yeah. Everything.
Everything.
Everything
Is
is
that an
different.
answer?
No, I don't think so. I think you'll hear a lot of folks having this feedback now of going back to first principles, right? Which is something I think we really lost. Like I remember joining my first tech company. It was like a $200 million company, so kind of higher mid market, PE backed, and we had 52 tools in our marketing tech stack. And I remember being like, so I had come from so actually before I worked in tech, I worked in nonprofit and education. So talk about 2 places that have no budget. I had no tech stack. Like I literally was lucky that we had Salesforce and like our Salesforce barely worked. Like it was not like, and so I came into this and was like, but do we know who our customer is and what they care about? And everyone was like, but have you used CoSchedule? And it's like, I don't know. Like, also, I don't even know if that exists anymore. But I was like, we have 5 tools to schedule our social media posts when we're getting like 4 likes on each one. Like, what's going on here? Like, this feels like a little wacky, right? And I do think like we were hiring people just to manage tools. Like I remember the time in life when you were hiring people to manage like a Terminus or a Six. Like they were literally getting hired to build in Google, like Google Studio and things like that. Like it definitely was really different because we were seeing such a big boom in technology, specifically for marketers and salespeople, right? Less salespeople than it started to move to salespeople. And so now what I'm seeing is like we've all seen the consolidation of the last, 3 to 4 years of, I actually think a lot of it's right sizing, like in terms of, and I've worked in Martech, right? Like I've been there, and I think a lot of it is like we created tools that created more tools that created more tools. It's just like weird, like don't even get me started on attribution, that we created an entire category to build tools to justify that our job should exist that we spend money on. It's like this crazy like and so I think a lot has changed now, right? I think there's a huge I noticed this a ton when I was building my team 2 years ago, is even the expectations of marketers have totally changed. Like, so I came up through content marketing, and you could be on like an 8-person content marketing team, and all of your goals were like volume goals. It was like create X number pieces of content, or like create quarterly something, right? And I always felt uncomfortable with that because it felt like, why? Like, I remember working at a company where they were like, well, our goal is to get to 3 pieces of content a day. I'm like, for what? Like, about what? Like, yeah, I don't like, why? Like, and if it's to build a muscle, I get it. Like, let's build the muscle and like understand it. But like, that's not why. It was just because like the last place the guy had been, they had done that, right? So I think that so much has changed in the up in what we're asking for our marketers to do, which is think critically about the work they're doing. There are not large teams anymore. You're looking at companies like, a lot of these AI companies are teams of 30 or 40, and they're $100 million companies. Like, it is, that's the extreme, I would say. But I do think we're asking for like lean and mean teams to think really critically about like being strategic and also executing, using tools that are useful and like efficiency creators, not complexity creators, right? And so I think that a lot has changed in terms of a day to day of a marketer over the last, for sure, 10 years, but like 5. Yeah, for sure.
As a young-esque marketer, I feel that. I even see posts now where it's like, if you don't know AI as a marketer, don't even like apply. And it's like, oh, geez, another thing I need to, which is fine
Oh,
because I love it and I've been deep into it. And I think it's a huge boost for kind of having a second brain almost. But again, if I like was deep into paid ads and I never thought of it, and all of a sudden I'm starting to see this, you're right, the expectations or maybe the demands on marketers is so high, which then makes me think of like, is there a career shift? Like, is there a shift where back in the day, to your point, you could be a Marketo specialist, you could be all these very super specialized people? And I'm making this argument, and maybe generalist is the wrong term, serial specialist, but kind of a marketer who can bring not only the thought to a problem, but bring all of the tools to say, I might not be able to like go into the email, but I understand email providers, sequences, drips, all that. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you see the marketer of 2030, 2040? Are they this super marketer so you can just hire 1 to 2 marketers? Or is that like is that over demanding? They'll burn out and we need to then right size to like having a few marketers. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, this is a really good question. It's something I think about a lot as I've moved into fractional work. So what I do now, I'm a fractional CMO, right? So, and I am a specialized fractional, like we should all be specialized, because just like you'd say to a software product, how do you know who to buy? Like, if you don't know what they do, like, and other than you're referred to them by someone that you trust, which is like totally how everyone buys everything, or you know them for something. So a lot of people know me because I'm the gal that does, messaging, positioning, differentiation, and I specifically work with founders on their brand to align that to their customers. So almost all the clients I have right now found me because of that, right? And so that means there are things I'm bad at. Like, there are things I'm not good at, and you should not hire me for them. And I think that is, there are a lot of these like more rented specializations that I'm seeing a lot of companies do that. Like, number one, if you're under 10 million, you don't need an executive team. Like, what, like, they're so expensive, really hard to figure out the kind of profile you need. They're really like, so I work with quite a few companies that are mostly in the 5 million range, and I'm their fractional CMO for 10 hours a week, and I'm all the strategic guidance they need. And then they have like 1 to 2 doers, and I think those doers are still really needed. Like, the companies I'm finding that are most efficient have a person overseeing strategy and someone overseeing that has a lot of confidence in systems and is able to do a lot, right? So they're able to dig into systems and learn things and get efficient. Um, and but I don't think that means that everyone is becoming a generalist at all, because there's too much to know. Like, how could you? I don't even know if the word generalist even makes sense anymore. like I saw myself as a generalist at the beginning of my career. Actually, I had a really hard time getting hired places because I couldn't pinpoint exactly what I was. I wasn't a Marketo specialist, right? So, and then I became a specialist that then was seen as like really great at my job because I actually knew more than my specialty, right? So then I saw value in that. Um, and so I'm thinking in terms of a career trajectory, either get really, really good at one thing. So, like, I have friends that are marketing ops people that will have jobs for the rest of their lives because those systems always break and no one wants to fix them. And no one's ever going to be a generalist enough to know how to deeply go into Salesforce and fix it. And so that is a really valuable skill that honestly is probably better off running your own consulting business for than being in house. And then there are folks that want to become generalists of like certain pillars. So like a brand kind of type generalist, brand content, community, that person. And then, you see like the folks of the world that are like ABM demand, like player coaches, like that is really helpful. And then you probably have your more opsy people. I actually put product marketing and brand together a lot these days. Like I always oversee both. So there's really probably different sides of marketing that you can become more specialized in, but you should know kind of everything within that bucket. That's the difference. So it's kind of a nuanced answer. I'm not sure. I'm also interested to see. I don't really know what's going to happen.
Well, I think that's the joy of it, the fun of it, but also for maybe me being early ish in my career, it's very important to position self because there's a lot of, I can only imagine SEO experts who really got really deep into Google and some of that who now are just kind of crapping their pants because it's like AI and TikTok as a search engine, don't know how to do that. Because if you're selling bread, I wouldn't do kind of Google, I'd go on TikTok because that's where my wife
Totally.
gets all of her. So like it's, for me, it's like interesting because you can position yourself against, I guess like my kind of mantra is stay in the game as long as possible. Kind of think financially is once you run out of money, it's over. But if you can keep $1, $2, you can always then play. So that's my thought is like I've never wanted to go too deep into something, becoming a clubhouse social expert because it's just
Me
like then
neither.
it's gone. So I agree with your point that it's so hard to be skillful at all of the things that marketing demands because it demands a million things, but it's almost like that thought process of, and that's why this show's interesting because I know if I asked a lot of specialists what is marketing, to send emails if I'm an email expert and to send, and you kind of miss the pie for your slice, and I think that's a huge challenge because with things moving so quick, it's almost the ability to think versus knowing what to think, which then you're right, it's not generalist, maybe it's a different word. So I want to keep like workshopping it, but I really feel AI allows me to be a SEO specialist with metadata and all these things that I had to learn before, but now I
Yep.
can just use chat or use some of these to kind of get me that very specialized bit of like, what's the meta for this image that I need to put on the website? I don't know how to position it well, but there's probably someone who knows how to write those tags really well. Is that needed? So I think it's a both and. But I think, yeah, your point's very valid that like being a generalist today is really hard because you need to be so deep in all these different avenues to actually bring value, not just be a generalist, but no one wants to hire you or all these different things. So I
Totally.
feel it's fun to think about it and try to position yourself for whatever future is coming.
Who knows?
Shannon, I'm ready to get into life. I could talk to you forever about marketing. Are you ready to get a little deep here?
Let's do it.
So, what is the purpose of life? What should we be aiming for in our life? And this is just your answer. So, everybody has their own answer. But for you, what job is life? What are we trying to get out of this life?
I think it's timely that you're asking me this question now and at where I'm at in my life because I think I've spent more time thinking about it as I've gotten older. But my purpose in life is living an integrated life that consistently provides purpose and value, right? And I found for myself that I am not a person that leaves work at 5 and then starts my life or, leaves my life when I'm at work, or the way that I think about even the fact that I've started my own business. When people ask me about my business, they're like, "Oh, what are your goals?" I'm like, "Well, I have goals for my life. I have values for my life, and my business just aligns to those values. And I make business decisions based on the values for my life. So, I have a family. I have young kids, right? Like I have one young kid, one on the way. And I am, I have such a strong passion for the work that I do, and I want to do the work that feels meaningful to me. Like that's a part of it, right? And I think a lot of it is I've really been calling it, potentially some people call it a portfolio life. I've been calling it really like an integrated experience where I am every part of myself every part of the day. Um, and I weave in and out to those identities when they become really like useful and powerful to me. And sometimes one is overpowering the other, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, I feel very whole. And I think that that is really something that I have found working on my own has provided me the ability to do, that I didn't have before. Also, I decided to go out on my own when I had a 5-month-old baby, like a psycho. Um, but babies made me brave. I looked at him and was like, I can't, like, look at all the stuff I'm giving up by like working a 60-hour work week underneath somebody else's, like someone else owns my calendar. And I don't feel like I'm at a point where like that feels like a part of my identity right now. Like I need to, but also I'm not 100% wanting to be a caretaker, right? Like I want to be all these things, but I can't be them all at once. So how do I create this like integrated identity that allows me to be lots of things all the time? And that I feel like is very much feeling like what life is all about, right? Is and as I change, those parts change, and that's okay. You know, it feels much more changeable when the parts are constantly flowing, right? Like then I know this is a little bit loopy, but like that's how I think about like my existence these days, right? Like I am mom, I am CEO, I am advisor, I am dog parent, I am all of these things. I am
Uh,
vegetarian, whatever I am, right? Like all of these things, right? All at the same time. Wife
hmm.
too. Sorry, my husband,
Yeah, yeah.
but I am that too.
Hopefully he's not listening. You missed
No,
that.
he's
No,
not.
yeah, nobody listens except me. So I like that because I have a 2.5-month old, and I think there is. I
Oh,
recently read this kind of. It was more on dads. It was like Dad Mode, the name of the Substack, but it was all about like this realization that if my life sucks, my kid's life sucks. And it's a really, I mean, clearly it's why nonprofits exist to help parents who are struggling, but kind of from a place of privilege, I was able to look of like, I'm going to work and I'm hating my job. I don't like this. I don't like this. And it's like, how then, if my life is shit, can my kid's life not be shit? So then, like, for me, it was that moment last February, a year from today, when we found out, and it was like, I need to get this emotion. What was it for you that I don't, maybe your life wasn't disconnected, but clearly you're talking about interconnected. So what was a moment or a series of moments? Was it purely like me, that the child kind of looking at them being like, I want to be the parent, I don't want to be at work while you're growing and all this? Like, what was it for you, or what series of moments kind of got you to see this interconnectedness being a something to strive for?
I have always been a person that has lots of identities. So like I would work like I worked full time. I cared so much about my job, but I also, I owned a dance company and I danced 4 nights a week. Like I always had, and then I kind of like sunset that a little bit when I went and got my MBA. So then I was a student and a person that worked. Like I've always been a person that's a little bit multi, I don't know, probably, and maybe it's ADHD. But I have asked my therapist, but I've always been very comfortable being lots of things, right? And then I will say, so when we found out we were having our first baby, it took us a while to also have this baby, which I think is another important part of like I'm wanting this identity so bad and I can't have it, right? And so that is something that was a challenge. But when I was pregnant, I did not feel like a mom at all. Like I just felt like there was this like thing coming. It was like a new hobby to like research bassinets. Like you just can't conceive of it, no, no pun intended, but you really can't like understand like what that's going to be like, right? And so I still was so hyper focused on my job. I had my first VP role. Like I was so concerned about making sure I had great coverage with me gone because of course I'm going back to work. Like I have full-time daycare set up. Like this is who I am. And then I was really excited to go back. I struggled staying home, like being a full-time caregiver, not something I'm built for at all, because it's hard to be more than one thing in that role. Like there is a thing that needs you all the time, and you are the only thing that can, you are the only like resource that can solve all of their needs. And so that felt very wrong to me too, right?
Hmm.
And luckily my husband was home for quite a bit of it. And so we were able to share that. And I had a very positive postpartum experience. But the idea of like not going back was never a question. Like I have a lot of friends that are like, oh, I'm dreading going back to work. Not a feeling I had. Like I was very excited to go back. So, but when I went back, I realized like, oh, so sitting in like 3 hour executive meetings where we come to no conclusions about anything and then potentially having to travel a bunch and like the company was like in a really tough position. Like a lot of what I had built had been kind of broken with me left. And I was like, you know what? Like this doesn't feel right either. And I didn't know that there was an option between being, I've talked about this on a few podcasts, like a full stay at home mom and a working mom, which I pictured as being out of the house like 10 hours a day. I was like, I feel like it's my responsibility as me, who I am, and this person's parent to try and do a better job at this for myself and for my family. And had some runway, had some ability to do it. And it just felt like I had to. It was this like gut feeling of like, I have to fix this. Like, this can't be like this forever. And, it wasn't perfect and easy, but I was able to offboard that, my full-time job into my first client, and I was able to get one more. And then, I had a few slow months, but then was able to pick back up. And now I make more money in half the time, fully remote on my own schedule. My son's still in full-time daycare though, because I like want to make sure that that's something he still gets, but I can pick him up at 3:30 if I want to. And so that's really, it's a little bit of a complex answer. It wasn't like the moment my child was born, everything changed. Like, not at all for me, actually. It changed very slowly over time. And now I have a 16-month-old, and it's changing even more all the time, right? Like, I'm like, wow, I actually need to parent now. I don't just need to keep you alive. Like, there's like a whole nother level
Shifts.
of like,
Oh.
of my actions in front of him impact him. Like, you remember things from your childhood that like are the way your parents talk to each other or the way they talk to other people. Like, it's big. And I want to be able to have the ability to lean in or out of both of these identities when they need me, right? Which is like, my family needs more money right now, so I can take on more clients. My son needs more support right now in this phase of his life. I can take on less. Like, that's kind of the life that I really wanted to build. And I feel eternally grateful that I was able to do it. Because it's not easy.
How do you think about identity? Just so for me, it was about a month before our child was born, I got let go. So there was this lack of
Ugh.
identity of I'm an employee or I'm a worker. And I found a lot of identity in as a marketer. But then I've been reading a book by Rupert Sapira, many books by him, and he talks about this I am. So if you think about it, I am Jordan, I am Shannon. What is the similarness of those two statements? The I am. So his whole argument is that is the true essence of humans, is the I am. Now, if you're biblical, if you're a Christian, within Exodus, God says, I am the I am. So that is like the identity that never changes, that I am. Now, how do you work through, because clearly you've bridged well these identities, so then you lost one and you got this next one. Have you ever had an identity just stripped from you? I mean, clearly the worst of the worst is a child is, dead, and you're no longer a parent no more, because like that is the worst. But like, how do you deal with that? Or is your whole life built around always trying to have this smooth transition, so I have enough identities that I can kind of keep them going, I'm never identityless? Because I think that is like kind of the hopelessness where but then it's also a place of complete happiness, because I don't need an identity. I am, and that's it. Like, I don't need to be anything after that. I can find purpose in the I am. How do you deal with identities changing? And you kind of talked about it, but I just love to hear deeper on that, of like experiences maybe where an identity got kind of the rug pulled under you, or you wanted identity so bad and you got it and it was like, this isn't it. Like, I don't feel as fulfilled with this identity. Maybe talk a little bit about identity, because that's a fun kind of concept.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also a really hard one, because I think a lot of it is like a lot of it is put on you too sometimes, right? Where like for a while
Interesting.
I was a caregiver to a parent, right? So I had a sick parent, and
Mm,
I that identity was kind of thrust onto me, right? And it
you
happened
didn't
at the
choose.
same time where as I had my first time ever losing a job. I had never lost a job before, right? So this all happened at once. So like, I was becoming a caregiver for a parent that was really struggling, and I also lost a job that like also poached me from a job I loved. Like, I was making tons of money. I was doing all this, like, it was like the peak of my like financial prowess in my career, all these things, right? And not anymore. I look back and I laugh at it. But at the time it was like the most prestigious job I'd ever gotten, right? And I had to realize that like what part of me was that job and what part of it was just a kind of feature. If we're talking about features and bugs, right? Like, that is like, because what I really was at that time was a person that still had values that were, my family is the most important thing to me right now. But I also need value outside of them, because a lot of the decisions they're making, I can't control. Right. So it was a very complex thing that I was managing. Right. And at the same time, I was trying to become a parent myself and couldn't. And it was horrible. Like, honestly, it was like, you look back at that time in your life and you're like, I felt so lost, right? And what I would typically do though is I would look at each day and say, not every day was like this. Also, I don't want to come off as like I have everything figured out. I would look at each day and say, I have the ability to serve a part of myself today in the way that I can, because I have time that I didn't used to have. So, like, how can I prioritize? Like, I love I actually coach at a gym that's local to here, but I wasn't a coach yet at the time. So I was like, I can now go to the gym whenever I want. Like, I can make sure I'm still like, a part of me is still really good at the job that I had. So let's connect with a bunch of people and talk to them about it. Like, I was able to get a new job really quick and I was very lucky. But, and then, a part of it was like, I have to separate myself as my caregiver to my parent because I'm not making all their medical decisions for them. So like, I can give what I can give. So I don't have regrets about this time that I like didn't do that, but not at the expense of my own like experience, right? And also, all of these things were a moment in time. That's a good reminder too, is like nothing is permanent. It's the best part. I'm sure you're really feeling that right now in your parenthood where you are. Is like the good is not permanent, the bad is not permanent. So it's like you look at it all, it's like the sleepless nights are not permanent, but also the sleepful nights are not permanent. Like I am, like, and I'm thinking about, as my family is now going to grow, right? We're going to have a second baby. Like my life will change a lot and that none of it will be permanent. And it's like, how can I stay, I'm not necessarily religious, but this part of the I am, it's like, how can that part stay? Like my values have never changed, but the way that they're expressed in the world do change, whether it's my job or, the role I'm playing as as a wife or as a daughter, as a mom, right? Like that's the thing that I think is, and that's what it's all about, right? Like that is like, and being okay with that and being totally like fine as the world shifts and changes because you just don't have control over so much of it.
Thank you for sharing. I know sometimes I think it's very easy for us to look at people online and the success, and maybe you've shared some of those things in different podcasts, but I do find this part of the podcast is always unique because the parts people show of themselves, it's like, oh, I loved your kind of Bofu kind of content on Bofu, but like this is a little bit more fun or that. I love that because I think many of us have those moments of trying to gain an identity, can't gain that. I mean, parenthood is probably one of the hardest where it's just like, there's really not much you can do to gain that. Where like with
the less
job,
you worry about it, the more likely you are to have it. It's awful. It's awful. It's like the opposite of everything you've ever learned. It is terrible.
I think your point of everything being not permanent, which I think is a Buddhist term of impermanence, which just means things are always changing. And I use this thought of a river is you can never step in the same river twice because that river is different the second time you. And so even if I'm going to do something today, go to the gym, it's going to be different. There's going to be a different car coming. And so I think it's a choice. It's a choice to either think that life is always the same and when things change it's like, oh, this is terrible, or to choose that like everything is constantly changing and how can I be okay in this state of impermanence, which again, to some of the things you said, it's way harder than it kind of maybe looks when we're looking back at it retrospectively of like, look, I got through it all. But during that, maybe it's just because I'm in some of it right now, it's like, holy moly, I don't know how this ever changes, but everything's changing. So I'm trying to grab onto impermanence. So I appreciate you sharing.
Totally. And I think I always go back to, I love Brene Brown. I read like all of her stuff. And she has this concept of FFTs, which is effing first times, right? So this idea that like you recognizing when you're in an FFT. So like I was caring for a parent for the first time, being their only caregiver, like total role reversal there, right? Like that is like a really hard, and realizing just sitting in the fact that this is an FFT and it sucks. And it's going to, like just recognizing, but it's not permanent. And the next time I have to do it, I'll have so much more capacity to understand the way I'll feel. Right. And even like being pregnant again, it's like that first time was so scary. And the second time is much less scary. I've been a lot more sick. So there's like other issues there. But I'm like, oh, like recognizing you're in those moments is also really giving yourself a lot of grace too, which is like, getting laid off for the first time. You're in an FFT. This feels so awful. Like, I don't know. I've never felt this kind of like incongruous feeling. Like, what do I do? And then if you've lost another, you realize almost everyone's done it. And lots of people have done it multiple times. And it just gets like, doesn't mean the current feeling is not awful though. Like recognizing that current feeling, knowing you're in it, and then being able to just like ride through it and know it'll never happen again because it'll never be the first time again. And that is like, a very I think about that concept a lot when I'm doing new things, whether work, life, whatever it is.
That's beautiful. And I think it's a great place to end this podcast. Shannon, thank you so much for sharing both marketing wisdom, but so much of your life in parenting wisdom, as I need all of it I can get. So thank you for coming on. This was fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.